You see a lot of those because in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, Chelsea thought, we'll flood the market with these because people can buy them. But this one is neat in that it has this vintage, probably original to the clock, surround, which is kind of neat. This clock right here is 1899, and it's an onyx case. If you look in the Boston catalog, you'll see that clock. So when Boston went out of business and sold to Ansonia, they didn't sell everything to Ansonia. They must have sold some things to Chelsea. Chelsea put a movement in this, and if you go to my website, chelseaclockmuseum.com, go to the Chelsea page, scroll down, you'll see the movement in this clock. Instead of being gilt, it's nickel damaskene. It is spectacular. It's house strike, and this dial right here, this porcelain dial, in that format with those Victorian style numbers is what Chelsea used when they made the patent document for the house strike movement or the ship's bell. They used this dial, and so for that reason it's kind of neat. Now this is the end of Chelsea clock. All of these clocks you've seen here, even the big ones, were like $100, maybe $300 for that yacht wheel down there at the time they were sold. But if you didn't want to buy most of them were less than $100. If you didn't want to buy one of those, it's like if you're a rich man and you lived in New York City, you went to Tiffany & Company, and you didn't just buy a Tiffany & Company clock, because a lot of these Chelseas say Tiffany & Company on it, but Chelsea Clock made them, and Tiffany just put their name on them. But in 1879, Tiffany wanted to break into the clock business themselves, and so they set up an in-house clock shop. And Joseph Lindauer was a clockmaker. He was from Germany, just awesome clockmaker. And another guy named George Paulding Farnham was the design expert at Chelsea before Louis Comfort Tiffany fired him. Big mistake. But George Paulding Farnham designed all the enameled brooches. He did jewelry, anything with design, he did it. And those two guys started this in-house clock shop, and it lasted till about 1910. And during that period, Tiffany & Company Makers is what the name of this in-house clock shop was. Very different from Tiffany & Company. Tiffany & Company Makers, they made about 828 items of all kinds, all different kinds of clocks. Out of that 828 items, they made 28 ship's bell clocks for rich guys. And this is one of them right here. This was made for Frederick W. Vanderbilt. He owned the New York Central Railroad. He was the son of Commodore Vanderbilt. The guy just had hot and cold running money his whole life. I mean, anything he wanted, he bought. It was, he bought this clock. And what's neat about it, the case is a Art Nouveau nautical scene. And I'll pick it up so you can come up here and take a look at it. The bottom half is water and the top half is sky. And on the sky, you can see the clouds. There's a moon and a sun. And on the bottom here, there's a seashell, because that would be in the water. Over here, these wiggly lines are Art Nouveau waves with seaweed. And over here, you can see the tail of a fish sticking out of the water. And that's all etched into the finish, or into the case, the bronze case. And then you say, well, the finish looks a little, this is a gilt and silver finish. And like with Tiffany items, if you take off the original finish, like you reduce the value by half probably. And the dial on this is very plain, but the hands are two sea dragons. Can you see the sea dragons? The engraving on them is exquisite. You know, there's little scales on the tail, and one of the sea dragons, his face is a moon, and he has wings for ears. Can you see him? Put your loop on that. Isn't that neat? Yeah. Anyway, so Frederick Vanderbilt was the first Vanderbilt to go to college. He went to Yale University, went to the Sheffield Engineering School. And he endowed the Sheffield engineering, he built them buildings and money and everything. It was like, he was proud of being a graduate there. And he gave this clock before he died to one of his professors at Yale University. And I got this clock out of the estate of his wife after she got dementia and lost her mind. And somebody sold me the clock. And this is a picture of the Conqueror. This is the yacht. It's like a 250-foot yacht that Frederick Vanderbilt owned during the period that he had this clock. So more than likely this clock was on here. I don't have any documentation that it was on there, but they didn't buy these clocks at the time, any of these marine clocks to put in the homes. The women wouldn't allow it. You know, they didn't want that kind of crap in their house. They wanted decorative clocks like this.
Right.
But today, you know, you might go into somebody's house and the men have put these things on the wall without the women's approval. But back then, that didn't happen. This clock was on a yacht, probably this one. Now this next one, the documentation on this is unbelievable. The Tiffany records that are up in the New York Historical Society show that this clock was sold to a man named William Weld in 1882. And William Weld, his descendant, became governor of Massachusetts. You might have heard him. I think he ran for president or tried to run for president just shortly, but it's the same family. And they've had more money than they needed for hundreds of years, that family. And in 1882, William Weld, he was 27 years old. He inherited from his grandfather $27 million in 1882. That was like over $1 billion today. And he bought this clock from Tiffany and Company makers. And this clock, the records show, it cost $238 in 1882 to manufacture, materials and labor. And they probably sold it, we don't know for sure, for at least 2, maybe 3 times that amount. Yeah. And the clock, if you look at it, it's got these little funky feet with screw holes in it that are chamfered. And that was so you could put it on a yacht. And the clock strikes ship's bells. It's got a balance wheel escapement. It's got, instead of having a bell, one bell, it's got 2 bells. So it goes on the hour, it strikes on one bell, ding, 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 ding. But on the half hour, it goes ding, 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 dong. You know, it's got a different tone. So if you're not listening closely, you might think it's the hour. But if you hear that odd tone, you know it's the half hour. Anyway, the clock also has, across the top here, it's got a calendar function and a moving moon dial with a beautiful little moon face. You ought to come up and look at that close. It's just really detailed. And this also has dragon hands, but unlike this clock that has 2 dragons on the face, this only has 1 because the hour hand is the back part and the front part is the hour hand and minute hand. You know, they had to split the dragon in half there. And this clock, William Weld, he bought this yacht, Jatana here in 1882. It's over 100 feet, pretty not too shabby. And he sailed it around the world because, you know, he's a man of leisure. He's 27 years old. He got $27 million. He bought a yacht. He bought a clock. He got some babes on the yacht, and they sailed all over the place. You know, it was pretty neat. And this is a picture of the interior of the Salon of Jatana right here. And if you look at this picture, there's a fireplace here that would burn coal at the time, and there's a mantle there, and this clock is on the mantle. You can see it. And that is just unheard of to find. Like all these clocks, a lot of these I don't know who bought them, where they were, or anything, but to be able to see this clock in its original setting. If you look at the picture, you can see the clock look very dark. It's dark. And here, it's much lighter. This is made out of walnut and cherry. The light wood is cherry, and the little darker wood is walnut, but you can see it's bleached a little bit over the years. It still's got a nice look to it. The top is made out of a couple pieces. You can see this back piece here is burled. It's It's pretty if you can lean over and take a look at it. 828 items, 91 of them were carriage clocks. And this is one of those carriage clocks. It's in the Louis XIV style, and they only made 3 of those. And this one strikes petite sonnerie. You know, when you push the button, it'll repeat the last hour and the quarter. Ding dong, that's the first quarter. And ding dong is the second quarter. And if you let it run, it will automatically strike the hour on the hour, and it'll give the quarter. But a grand sonnerie, like on the quarter, if you let it run, it does the hour and the quarter. And that's the difference between a petite and a grand sonnerie. And so this is kind of, you know, if you're into nautical clocks, you kind of, since they're balance wheels, sometimes you branch off into carriage clocks because the guys made them too. You know? These candlesticks were made also, they're bronze with a gilt finish, a Tiffany finish that you don't want to mess with. Tiffany and Company makers, they're stamped in the bottom. And whenever you see Tiffany and Company makers, you know they made it in-house. They made silver, Tiffany and Company makers. They made clocks, watches. They even made watches. But understand the difference between anything marked just plain Tiffany and Company. That's probably made somewhere else, and they just put their name on it.
For their store.
Yeah, for their store. And most people don't understand that difference, but when you're looking around and you find Tiffany and Company makers, you know, with the glass, Tiffany and Company makers items transcends horology, because people buy these clocks for the decorative beauty, and maybe not so much that, because you know that just looks like a bracket clock, but all this Art Nouveau engraving and the fancy hands and everything. And that brings us to this clock down here. This is another one of the 28 ship's clocks. This was purchased in 1891 by Hugh D. Auchincloss of Newport, Rhode Island. He was, that's a name that's not real familiar, but as I talk, it'll come into perfect view. He and his brother bought the yacht Katrina and put this clock on there. And the clock is made out of bronze, and I have it, it's not displayed very well. If you look at the bottom barometer instrument, there's 4 holes, they're chamfered on the inside. It's made to be bolted to the wall and look like it's floating. And at home, I have it in an archway, and I have it put on the molding, and it looks like it extends past the wall on either side, and it's just floating there. It's just magnificent. And I'll put it right here so you can look closely at it. But just all you engineers out there, think about making this rope here. You get a piece of bronze, a rod that's 1/4 inch, it's about